It's my nerd world. Welcome to it. A Star Wars show. Who wants to talk about Obi Wan Kenobi Part 3 and be spoilery about it? Well, I do, because I'm hosting the show. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk Obi Wan Kenobi Part 3. We'll talk a little Obi Wan Kenobi Parts 1 and 2 and be a little spoilery because I didn't talk spoilers on last week's episode. But if you haven't watched Part 3 of the Kenobi live-action show on Disney+, pause the show. Pause it. Pause it right now. And then come back after you've watched it, and then you can hear me talk about like how great it was, because I know you thought it was great too. All right, let's go ahead and get to this week's episode. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen.
They're coming. Stay hidden, or we will not survive.
Leave us alone.
When the time comes, he must be trained.
Like you trained his father? You still want Kenobi. He's gone.
Maybe you've been looking in the wrong places. I want every lowlife and bounty hunter to squeeze him. You can't run, Obi-Wan! You can't escape him!
It is my Nerd World, a Star Wars show, and I'm your host, Jon Justice. Glad you're with another episode this week. As always, if you want to email TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, the Jon Justice@gmail.com works as well. You can go on by mynerdworld.net too. Love to hear from you. And always love to hear from you to get your thoughts on all things relating to Star Wars, specifically as we talk about Obi Wan Kenobi, the most recent addition to Star Wars canon on Disney+. Look, expectations are so high, for me personally, going into these shows. One thing that I love about the live-action TV format, while I'm a bigger fan of the theatrical presentations for Star Wars, which I've talked about many times on the show, I do really enjoy every week being able to sit down and prepare myself to watch a brand new piece of Star Wars content, live-action Star Wars content that I've never seen before. One of the talking points that I've discussed many times on the show was that the experience of going to see a new Star Wars film, whether it's, one of the spin-off movies or whether it's one of the saga films, ever since that first movie. And part of the reason why I think The Empire Strikes Back is so special and a favorite among Star Wars fans is because it was the first Star Wars movie where we had that anticipation, expectation, and experience of seeing a new Star Wars film for the first time. Going in to see the original Star Wars, we didn't know what to expect. Now, I think this is going to be different for a lot of people, and it would be fascinating if I had the means to do this. But if a pollster, a pollster company, a company that conducts polls or does analytics, I would love to see a study done. Probably a better way to put it. I would love to see a study done of Star Wars fans of all ages to find out what their first experience was with Star Wars, what's the first thing they ever watched, and then what was the next thing they watched. And then to find out if that next thing ranks high on their list of favorite Star Wars things. Again, working off of the theory that The Empire Strikes Back, while it is a fantastic and nearly flawless movie, is also so very high on so many lists of those that grew up on the original trilogy, in my opinion, because if you were into Star Wars before The Empire Strikes Back, you were really anticipating that film. And the opening of any new piece of live-action content, for me, always carries with it a sense of, it almost feels like Christmas morning going into it to watch any new piece of live-action Star Wars content. And the same rings true for Obi Wan Kenobi. Now, that being said, I personally have to adjust a bit of my expectations to the storytelling formats because it's a TV show, and that's okay. I find myself judging the live-action TV show content probably a little too harshly because I'm wanting the cinematic experience rather than allowing myself to get into the content because it is a television show. That's happened less with The Mandalorian. Not every Mandalorian episode, but most Mandalorian episodes really do, in my opinion, carry a cinematic flair to it. I think the ones that don't are the ones that are done by less experienced directors working with also less experienced cinematographers. And I do believe, and for me personally, I do think that if there's one criticism, and I really only have one criticism of Obi Wan Kenobi, it is that some of the shots just aren't covered and shot in a way that lends itself to that cinematic quality, and it does make it feel more like a TV show. Now, I initially had a larger complaint about Episode 3 of Obi Wan Kenobi for this very reason. However, I watched it on my laptop first thing in the morning on Wednesday morning instead of watching it on the big screen. And I didn't want to wake the house up by going up to the big TV. People were sleeping in different places that they normally do. And I was like, well, I don't want to wake the house up. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, so I'll watch it on my laptop. Watching Episode 3 for a second time on my big screen, I had a much different experience with it in terms of the way it was shot. And it felt less like a TV show. Apart from a few shots there at the end on the mining planet. So, look, all that being said, let's dive into it. I really want to get into my thoughts on Episode 1 and 2 from a spoiler standpoint, and then I do a bit of a deep dive on Episode 3, which I thought was absolutely fantastic for a lot of different reasons.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake, and I need help.
So, talking first about Episodes 1 and 2 really quick, and then we'll go deeper into Episode 3. I've watched both 1 and 2 now 3 times, I think, maybe 4. And I find myself wanting to go back and watch them again. And much in the same way I have with The Mandalorian, less so for the Book of Boba Fett, even though I've watched that entire series twice. I find myself, even with these handful of first episodes, keying in on particular things that are driving me back to want to go and watch them over and over as opposed to watching some other piece of content. First and foremost, I think the way that they have handled Obi-Wan in isolation Obi-Wan in isolation has been spot on. And while that first episode, Part 1, Episode 1, is paced slower than 2 and 3, I do find it incredibly compelling. The comedic moment between Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Jawa returning his items and trying to sell things back to him, and the dialogue that takes place between those two was great. Seeing Obi-Wan at this point in time in his life living in a cave as opposed to when we meet him in A New Hope, and he has a home, and he has things in his home. He's decorated his home. Right now, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi again in isolation, downtrodden, defeated, watching over this child that he knows is a new hope for the future of the Jedi and the galaxy, but being helpless to be a part of it apart from just making sure that he is protected. This, of course, drives the narrative of Leia being captured and Obi-Wan's reluctance to want to leave Tatooine to go and find her, which I think they played note for note perfectly. You buy in to his anguish at the end of part 1 when he's heading to the spaceport and he's got the ticket in his hand. You buy into the conflict within Obi Wan Kenobi of still not knowing if he wants to get on that ship, but understanding that Bail Organa was absolutely correct, that Leia is important too. And I don't think that Obi Wan Kenobi sees his mission to go save Leia in the same way in terms of importance as he does for watching Luke. I still feel like Obi Wan Kenobi looks at Leia as, I must protect her. She's also one of the twins. I said I would protect them both, but he's also doing it for Bail Organa, and it's a child that needs his help. I don't get the feeling that he's going and trying to get her back and protecting her because she is the future of the galaxy and the New Hope. I still think he has that focused on Luke. And I believe that's done intentionally to preserve the continuity of the original trilogy, given that it takes Yoda saying, you know, when Obi-Wan says in The Empire Strikes Back, speaking of which, you know, that boy is our last hope. No, there is another. Now, I know that wasn't the game plan when Lucas wrote those films, but that's the canon that we have to work with. And so it makes sense that Obi-Wan is doing this for Bail Organa. He's doing this because this is a 10-year-old child that needs his help. This was his duty in his prior life as a Jedi, of which now he doesn't really view himself as being one. And he still doesn't as we get to part 3. All right, and I don't want to wipe out too much on episodes 1 and 2, and I feel like I am, so let me move through just a couple of the highlights for me. Reva and the Inquisitors. I want to make one quick comment. I know there's controversy around Reva and the fandom. I'm ignoring it. And honestly, I will say this. I wish that Disney, Lucasfilm, and the Star Wars account and everybody would ignore any negativity whatsoever. I personally feel like acknowledging the negativity is feeding the negativity, and if you don't acknowledge it and you realize that's a portion of the fandom that you're never going to make happy, or horrible, awful people that aren't going to change, and you're not going to change them, then why address it? There's plenty of individuals out there that are supporting this particular character. Now, I know that the acknowledgement of this criticism to Reva and the actress is providing a level of support and shoring up support for Moses Ingram and for the character Reva. However, I hate the fact that it also fuels the negativity as well. So that's all I want to say about it. Let's move on. And let me say up front, even before that nonsense erupted, I love this character. I loved Reva from the get-go because she came off as legitimately threatening to me. She's clearly got motivations of her own. She's clearly got some depth to her, right? She's, in my view, definitely one of the younglings that escapes in the flashback in episode 1 that opens the show. And I think there's ambiguity here as to what she's actually doing. I love the Inquisitors. I don't believe the Grand Inquisitor is dead by any stretch of the imagination. We see him in trailers and other shots that we haven't seen yet. And, of course, we're not going to have Dave Filoni or anybody go and break the continuity of Rebels. That series is way too important. But I love the Inquisitors. I think they're fantastic. I hope that we get some lightsaber action beyond Reva and what we've seen of the spinny saber with the Grand Inquisitor, and I expect that we will. We still have 3 episodes to go, and every episode has just been ramping up the stakes. I love the vehicles in the series so far. Some of the new ships that we've got, especially and specifically Alderaan, and I talked about this a bit last week, but I'm really liking some of the new ship designs that we are seeing. Young Leia, goes without saying, that actress is just doing a spectacular job of portraying a young Leia. And I mentioned this on last week's episode, but I appreciate the fact that the show is self-referential from the standpoint of Obi-Wan at one point, says to her, "You don't sound like a 10-year-old, right?" And that's the deal. And if that's the extent, and I personally believe that should be the extent of sort of her Force connection, is that she's coming off as an older individual than 10 years old, that works, because you can't give her too much at this point in time based on what we know of the character later on in the timeline. Haja, Kumail Nanjiani, I love that guy as an actor. He's playing the same character he always plays, but it absolutely works, especially in the latter half of episode 2. Also, speaking of the latter half of episode 2, the anguish that Obi Wan Kenobi feels in the revelation that Anakin is still alive, him not knowing that at that point in time, Reva tracking him down in the warehouse outside of the cargo ship that they take to get off of the planet, and then the arrival of the Grand Inquisitor. I want more of the Grand Inquisitor. I hope that they rectify that situation quickly so we can get him in these last 3 episodes, because I really, really like the Grand Inquisitor in the series. But her stalking, her being creepy, trying to capture Obi-Wan Kenobi, it just was absolutely fantastic. Now let's go ahead and get into part 3.
This is not going to go the way you think.
The dialogue for me is really, really working. I've seen some negativity around the writing. I don't get it, but everybody's got an opinion and whatever. But to me, the dialogue, especially the moments between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Leia, are really, really working to elevate the quieter moments, the slower moments in the show. And that definitely is a part of part 3. It does have some slower moments, but the action also picks up as well. But the dialogue between those characters, and Leia is already evolving in it, right? She's showing some remorse in it. She's missing home. A 10-year-old would. I love the fact that Obi-Wan Kenobi is clearly a broken individual, and he's recognizing how jaded he is. He comes off as straight up rude and almost mean to Leia on a couple of occasions, but he immediately corrects himself, and it really does expose how vulnerable this man is, especially given what we know of him from the prequel trilogy and the heartbreak that we see at the end of the Revenge of the Sith carries directly through 10 years later. His continued reaching out to Qui-Gon Jinn, but he can't find him. And I'm convinced it's because he's not tapped back into the Force. He needs encouragement, and he's not getting it. He's the opposite of Reva. Reva has to be held back. She doesn't need any encouragement, which to me speaks to the question of what her true motivation actually is. And I'll talk more about this in just a moment. But Obi-Wan recognizes how jaded he is and quickly tries to go and correct himself around Leia, because that's not really who he is. At the moment, though, he's still absolutely broken. I love the parallels that we're seeing to Luke in The Last Jedi. Luke believing that the Jedi need to die or are dead already. To Rey in The Rise of Skywalker, unable to reach the voices of the past. The burying of the lightsabers, going back to the first episode. I love the fact that Obi-Wan Kenobi not only buried his and Anakin's lightsabers, but the burying of lightsabers started in The Rise of Skywalker. And so now we see that's kind of a thing. Whether or not Rey knew it or not, but it is a thing now that started in The Rise of Skywalker, and now we see, oh, okay, this is something that we do. He even tells the Jedi on the run on Tatooine to go and bury his lightsaber and go live a normal life. I'm loving these parallels of these characters from the other parts of the canon. And then we get into Darth Vader. The closing shot from Episode 2, between the close-up of Obi-Wan Kenobi, the close-up of Anakin Skywalker still in the Bacta tank. We see Vader being put together again. Probably could have moved a little bit slower, but not really a criticism, just an observation. But we see Vader being put together again, and at least for me, I kind of felt this sense of, again, more machine than man, and how that's got to be painful for Anakin Skywalker. Seeing Vader's castle on Mustafar made my day. I knew we were going to get it. I'm glad we got it. I've seen also people complaining about Vader's throne. I have no issue with it whatsoever. I thought it was great. I would take a whole series based off of Vader living in his castle. Vader's castle coming to Thursday nights on NBC. I would love, give me that show. Inquisitorius, the Inquisitor's lair, complex, whatever. It's fantastic. And speaking of cinematic, when Reva arrives in Chapter 3 back to the Inquisitorius, I mean, some of those shots are epic and awesome. Love those shots. And again, those are the moments of the show that I wish I wish there was a little bit more continuity, because when we get to the mining planet, especially the altercation between Vader and Obi-Wan, just the landscape around it, it seemed very... We shot this on in an actual mining place, an actual mining facility in Southern California. Now, I get a feeling that might be by design, because this is not going to be the only altercation, and I think that there was a intentional downplaying of this particular meeting between Obi-Wan and Vader. Not from a how they reacted to each other standpoint, because I do think that was done well. But I think in terms of not overdoing it for this particular meeting was to set up what we'll get probably in the final episode. Reva's story is unfolding and continues to unfold. I loved when Vader arrives on the mining planet, how the Inquisitors get very solemn and they very reverential and very respectful as Vader walks in. This is a true evil. But Reva wants to march out and confront Obi-Wan with Vader, which to me, again, is kind of speaking to what are her motivations here. Is she going to turn? Is she truly evil or hunting down Obi-Wan for another reason? Again, going back to the very opening shot of the series in the flashback to the Jedi Temple in Order 66. We were shown that for a reason. And I know that she's done some horrible things, lopping off people's hands, and would have done a lot more damage at the Grand Inquisitor, who is going to come back, by the way. Again, we've seen him, as I said, in other trailer footage. He'll come back. She would have done a heck of a lot more damage if the Inquisitor brother or the Grand Inquisitor hadn't stopped her on multiple occasions. But I'm not convinced that while she may be doing evil things, she's doing evil things for a bigger reason to get to Obi-Wan that may not be what we think. And I don't know more than that, by the way. So this is not spoilers. This is pure speculation on my part. I just think that Reva's motivations are clearly in question right now. Is she really evil? Is she hunting down Obi-Wan? If she is really evil, I do believe that we're looking at a situation where, especially when she's in the hideout, where the new character that we met, and why don't I have her name down here? Tia, the Imperial spy. We'll talk about her in just a moment. When we get to sort of that underground railroad, and she says that, there have been Jedi moving through here, and there were a lot of markings on the wall, references to Legends Jedi in the Legends part of the Star Wars storytelling. Quinlan Vos, of course, is named directly from Obi Wan Kenobi, and he's referenced by Obi Wan Kenobi in Revenge of the Sith as well. But when Reva arrives and she finds that room leading to the hidden tunnel, she stops on the Republic symbol for a moment, and she's stopping there for a reason. And I directly believe it's because she was a Padawan at one point in time who escaped Order 66, but again, also because either she's feeling the pull to the other side or her motivations aren't what we believe that they are. Getting to Tia, the Imperial spy, loved her. She was fantastic, and I specifically loved some of her dialogue relating to, one, when Leia says, can you teach me how to shoot a gun? The way that she delivers, she's going to make a good fighter one day, was spot on. And her explanation of joining the Empire, thinking that she was doing good, but then leaving and turning on the Empire and becoming basically a double agent when she realized the truth. I love that from the standpoint of it really does add to A New Hope. And I've said this before, I love this new content that adds more context to the original trilogy. It echoes why Luke was going to go and join the Imperial Academy with Biggs, who had subsequently then gone and joined the Rebellion. It always kind of landed weird with me that why does Luke want to go and join the Imperial Academy? And while he didn't necessarily like the Empire, and he said as much to Ben, I think he liked it less after talking with Ben, but I think at the same time, he was heeding the call to adventure. And that plays in nicely with the exchanges between Uncle Owen, who's just fantastic in his exchanges with Obi Wan Kenobi in that first episode. But Obi Wan Kenobi saying, there's a larger galaxy out there he needs to know about, and him wanting to give him the Skyhopper toy that you see Luke eventually playing with. And I do believe we're going to get more Luke within the series. I don't have confirmation of that at all, but I do firmly believe that while we are getting a focus on Leia more so than I expected, I do believe that in these next 3 episodes we will get some more Luke Skywalker as a young kid in all of this. But when Luke is there, has the toy, it adds context to him having the toy, and I think that we'll eventually see why he did end up getting that toy, because he's playing with it in A New Hope. But I love that line from Tia, because again, it just goes and adds further context to what we've seen in A New Hope, and helps me to understand further. All right, Luke was heeding the call to adventure that Obi-Wan Kenobi wanted him to heed in the first place, and it adds context to that whole meetup finally, where Obi-Wan Kenobi was kind of watching out for Luke, and it was Luke that ends up kind of finding him through the Force. That's the way that I read it, and Obi-Wan Kenobi realizing, okay, the time has come. Our new hope is finally here to go and do his part to save the galaxy. In all of those ways, it's absolutely working. Then we get to the final act of Part 3, and the arrival of Vader on the mining planet. I did think the sun went down really quick. I know they were inside of that particular building where Tio was showing them the Underground Railroad, right, the situation in the secret tunnel, but when it was bright outside, and I actually paid attention on the second watch. I was kind of wondering, and I know they probably weren't paying attention to this, but I was kind of wondering where the shadow was falling on the ground in relation to the day and where the sun was at the time, because when Vader arrives, it's already dark outside. Be that as it may, it's better to have Vader in the dark, and I do believe they wanted him shrouded in some darkness because they wanted to give us Vader in this Part 3, but at the same time didn't want to go all the way there because we're getting more Vader later on in these upcoming episodes. But Vader's arrival and his ruthlessness is downright murderous ruthlessness. It was really the stuff of horror movies. And I dug it, man. I dug it from the standpoint of that is a live action personification of what I remember as a child in 77 and 80, seeing Vader just choke dudes out without any qualms at all. And while we saw that in Rogue One, at the end of that film, when he's taking out the rebels, it's still, while it's ruthless and great, Vader walking down the street in the city and just killing teenagers and fathers, trying to draw Obi-Wan out. I mean, oh my gosh. It really speaks to he's more machine now than man, twisted and evil. Straight up evil. And then we get to the confrontation and a tortured Obi-Wan Kenobi who's trying to run away from this fight. He doesn't want any part of it. He doesn't. I think he's wrestling with what Anakin has become and his guilt that he feels for being the one that I believe he feels is responsible for putting him that way. And Vader says as much. You made me this way, dude. That's not what he said, but that's what it was. You know, what have you become? I've become what you made me. And Vader's just toying with him. He's just absolutely toying with him. Vader could have just taken him out. And almost did, but I don't think that's what Vader wanted because the Anakin is still there inside of him. The lightsaber battle, which you can't even really call it that because it really was just Vader one-handed lightsaber just messing with Obi Wan Kenobi. You even get a couple of the multiple bam, bam strikes from Vader, and he could have killed him on the spot, but he didn't want to. He wants to hurt Obi Wan Kenobi. And the decision to knock over the minerals, set them afire, and then drag Obi-Wan into them, oh my gosh. I mean, I was stunned that it went there. And I'm glad that it did. Because the storytelling has got to take risks like this. It's got to push the envelope. And Vader, I think, within the cultural zeitgeist, has not become a parody, but certainly lost that edge of ruthlessness and fear that we as children, and I'm speaking to you that are older, that we as children felt of this character and why it made his turn at the end of Return of the Jedi so powerful, and also accepted the fact that he also needed to die because he can't turn back on his horrible ways. I know that Kylo Ren was evil and bad, but you never really got a sense that he was as ruthless as Vader was. And again, I think that was by design. You weren't supposed to. We did see him killing mass amounts of nameless, helmeted faces at the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker, but at the same time, they're faceless, helmeted figures who were watching over the Wayfinder, right? But you don't really have any attachment to them. Seeing Vader walk down and just kill innocent people and snapping necks, that's brutal, that's torturous, that's the stuff of horror films. Seeing Vader light minerals on fire and force drag Obi-Wan into it, that's torture. But at the same time, when Tia shows up, as Vader orders the troopers, Vader puts the fire out, right? Orders the troopers to go and get Obi-Wan. Tia fires on the stormtrooper and then blows up the container further, igniting all the minerals and creating this big fire. I think we all know that Vader could have easily just walked through that fire and gotten him. But I also think that demonstrates the Anakin part of Vader that really, again, wasn't in it necessarily to kill him right then. He wanted to make him suffer and was fine in letting him leave. And we've seen Vader go and do that before. He could have put that fire out, right? He could have put that fire out that Tia had made. But I take this and the moment that he stood there in contemplation to mean that he wanted to hurt Obi-Wan, but at the same time, we all know there's still good in him, and of course there's still another story to tell. So I thought they handled it really well in sort of riding that line of making it believable that the loader droid could come and take Obi-Wan Kenobi away, and Vader would be fine with that, and we can kind of inject our opinion as to why specifically he went and did that. I thought overall it was a fantastic episode. I am excited to see where the rest of these stories, these 3 episodes, end up going. Here are some of my predictions, by the way. Again, I don't know anything about spoilers. These are just my predictions. We'll see if they come true. We're getting Qui-Gon in the show. That's my prediction. We wouldn't have Obi-Wan Kenobi saying his name out loud and reaching out to him and not being able to contact him. If in my mind, we wouldn't be getting Qui-Gon in Force Ghost form. Plus, Yoda tells Obi-Wan that, teach you to commune with him, Qui-Gon, in isolation, I will, or you will. He's been training for 10 years. And I think right now, Obi-Wan Kenobi is separated from the Force and needs to bring himself back in, much like Luke did. Again, parallels to Luke in The Last Jedi. Again, hat tip to Rian Johnson. And I believe that when Obi-Wan Kenobi does show up, he's going to convince Obi-Wan that he has to confront Vader again. And this will be the setup to, first, the final confrontation that we see in the series, but it'll also be a setup to the final confrontation that we eventually see in A New Hope. Qui-Gon Jinn basically telling Obi-Wan Kenobi, you can't cut yourself off from the Force. You are too important. Luke is going to need you at some point in time. You need to go and confront Vader again, probably to go and get Leia back. But at the same time, you need to do it for yourself. Stop holding yourself accountable. Quit sucking on worms. Step up and go take care of this. I'm certain that we're going to get something major within the story involving Reva. As I've mentioned, she's either got a vendetta or she's been playing the role of Inquisitor for a completely other reason, right? It had to be her at the beginning in that opening flashback at the beginning of episode 1. I also believe that we'll be getting the Grand Inquisitor back, and I think there's a possibility that when the Grand Inquisitor does return and lays out to Vader what happened, that, you know, I don't think Reva makes it out of this show alive, because we've seen Inquisitors before and she's not involved in Rebels. So if they were going to use a character that was in Rebels, you would have that character be in the show. And we know that some of the other Inquisitors are in Rebels, so I think that Reva's time is limited to these next 3 episodes in terms of Star Wars storytelling, and that she's either going to get taken out by Vader, or she's going to end up being taken out by the Grand Inquisitor when he gets one of his 2 stomachs, because those that don't know, that particular species does have 2 stomachs. When he gets one of his 2 stomachs patched up and shows back up, ticked off at her for jabbing her with a lightsaber. What do you think? How did you like it? Do you have any issues with the television quality of it? Or you're able to look past that? I have to kind of force myself to look past it. But it has not diminished my enjoyment of it. And talking about the episode again just makes me want to go and watch it once again. But I also would love to hear from you. Again, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Or leave a comment on YouTube if you happen to be listening there.
Something.
Whoops. Nope. Sorry, Ray. We've already played that one. This is the one we needed.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, first, Javier, friend of the show, writes, the Obi-Wan first 2 episodes were fantastic. Just what I was waiting for. I watched along with my wife. She's not a Star Wars fan, but loves it as well. Now waiting for the best. I hope they don't ruin the final meet between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in the Death Star in Episode 4. That's my only concerns. Regards, Javier. Yeah, I think what's going to happen in that final confrontation that we're going to get in Obi-Wan Kenobi is a rational explanation as to why that lightsaber fight in The New Hope is what it is. I think that Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader in Obi-Wan Kenobi the show are going to jack each other up really, really bad. That's my thought. Now, it can't be too bad, because we do see Vader hold his own against Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, respectively. But at the same time, I think that there will be potentially built in a better rationale, or maybe just maybe an understanding between these two. It has been said that the lightsaber fights would be more akin to something in the prequels. This first confrontation certainly was not akin to that, given that it really was sort of a one-sided fight of just Vader just jacking with Obi-Wan Kenobi, which was still great, by the way. No, I think we're going to get a lot of context to A New Hope in this, in probably the final 6th episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi. All right, friend of the show, Ben, writes, first wanted to say, John, I hope your upcoming surgery goes well. I do, too. I'm sure it will. June 15th is the date for that. I appreciate all of the prayers, by the way. I really, really do. It means a lot to me. But I've completed all of my doctor visits and my tests and everything that needs to get done to make sure the rest of me is all healthy and fine. I just need to fix this leak. And after that, I'll be all healthy and fine. Ben goes on to say, I've been praying for you to have success and that you will recover swiftly. Thank you, Ben. I do, as I said, appreciate it. On a funny note, are you saving a series to watch while you recover or going to work on a new book? Interesting you said that. Both. As a matter of fact. So I've been wrestling with, and I'll keep this quick, I've been wrestling with writing. I had a fantasy series that I have a lot of detailed notes for, that I do plan on writing one day. But I've been wrestling it with what I want to write next. And I've been toying with the idea of a 3rd trilogy for the EMBARK series. But I hadn't really landed on a story. I had a rough idea for a story, but I hadn't landed on one. Well, I landed on one. And I'm probably going to start working on book 8 in the EMBARK series with the intention of doing one more trilogy in the series too. So 8, 8, 9, and 10. So to complete the series at 10 books. The working title at the moment, and I'll just share it with you guys and not anybody else, is From Yesterday. That's the working title. And again, I do have a story, and I'm pretty excited about this story. It's going to be very different from the other stories that I've written so far. In terms of things that I might be watching when I recover, yeah, I've got a whole Blu-ray wallet. It's an old CD wallet, but I have a Blu-ray wallet filled with movies that I plan on watching. Plus, I haven't watched Peacemaker on HBO Max yet. I don't know why I haven't watched it yet, so I'm going to watch that. Definitely rewatching Foundation again on Apple Plus. That is fantastic sci-fi, by the way. And I've been working through Formula One Drive to Survive on Netflix. I love my NASCAR, but actually I've been getting into Formula One. Those Formula One cars are like spaceships that run on asphalt and rubber, and it's really cool. So I'm kind of getting into Formula One. So I'm planning on continuing to watch the Formula One Drive to Survive on Netflix. He goes on to say, speaking of books, I have not purchased your latest book yet. We'll go do that. It's on my to-do list. We'll go to do it. Looking forward to reading it, but you can't read it, Ben, if you don't buy it. I will say the only downside to purchasing your ebooks is that you cannot get them signed. I can just send you my signature. I can write it down, scan it, and send it to you if you. Not the same thing. I meant to email you after your March 12th episode about Obi-Wan not knowing or realizing Anakin was alive. At the time, I really liked that insight, and it proved correct at the end of episode 2. That's right. Random thoughts I had at the end of watching the first 2 episodes. I feel the writers are alluding to Leia using the Force as a young child and not realizing it. Yep. The way she could read people. Yep. Or what they were thinking, her cousin, Obi-Wan, saying something like, "Who are you?" I felt the writers missed an opportunity to show Grogu during the opening scene of the Jedi Temple being attacked. Yeah, but we saw that in that Book of Boba Fett Mandalorian episode, right? No. That was the Ahsoka episode from Season 2 of The Mandalorian, wasn't it? When we got the background. So we've already seen his perspective and we know that he wasn't there. But I understand what you're saying, Ben. Do you believe Reva is one of the youngling Jedi that is attacked at the opening scene of Episode 1? Yes, I do. Reva knew that Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker. She uses his full name. Interestingly, Owen did not say his last name when he met Reva, but Reva knew that he was a farmer. Interesting. Right, Owen didn't say his last name. I think, because I've watched that episode 3 times now, I'm pretty sure that Owen says he's a farmer before Reva goes and acknowledges it. When she walks up and taps him on the chest and says, "I like that about you, Owen." It would be interesting to find out more about the Inquisitors and their relationship to Vader and Sidious. That's interesting, too. And we haven't had any Sidious in this, and I wonder if we will. I don't think so. I think they're saving Sidious for Andor. That's my take. With them being former Jedi and the rule of 2, how do they fit into the equation? They're dark side wielders, but they are not. And the Inquisitors were created by George Lucas to solve the problem of the rule of 2 in the storytelling. So to hunt down the Jedi, since it's the rule of 2, the Inquisitors go and fill that void by not being straight up Sith. They're Inquisitors using the dark side. So it was almost like a story fix for Lucas, which I'm totally fine with, because it makes sense there would be dark side wielders, right? Even though we do get Sith eyes in the Grand Inquisitor. I like that Obi-Wan was asking Qui-Gon after his nightmare. Yep, was asking for Qui-Gon after his nightmare. Gives me hope that we'll see him as a Force ghost. I'm pretty much convinced we will. Obi-Wan has pretty much hid himself from the Force for those 10 years to stay hidden. It's interesting how much he has lost from his powers during those 10 years. If he is to fight Vader, how will he train? Interesting, yeah, and we already know that he's not up for the task right now. Will he be visiting Yoda or getting some Force ghost help? Nice story arc of showing Obi-Wan buried his lightsabers in the desert while seeing Rey buried Luke and Leia's. Yes, and I didn't even pre-read your email, Ben, before I shared it. I'm glad you caught that, too. So thank you, Ben. Always great to hear from you. And lastly this week, friend of the show, SheVP writes, "Spoilers ahead. Look away if you don't want spoilers." I loved it, writes SheVP. "My least favorite part were the Inquisitors." Interesting. "That precious little darling that plays Leia stole my heart." Not surprising. She did such an amazing job. Yes, she did. The scenes with her and Bail were just beautiful, and the scenes with Bail and Obi-Wan were tear-inducing. When Bail says, "What about your responsibility to his daughter? She's just as important as he is." I cried. And when Obi-Wan alludes to the fact that Leia reminds him of her mother, I cried. And folks thinking that he was talking about Satine, I did. Made me laugh. My wife says it's Padme. I still say it's Satine. Even though we got the Padme reference of Obi-Wan when he slipped up and called Leia, and then said that she looks like her mother, I'm still convinced he was talking about Satine. And I'm only convinced he was talking about Satine because Deborah Chow put on her list of things to watch before the Obi Wan Kenobi series the Clone Wars episodes with Satine. And the way he was talking about whoever the female was that Leia reminded him of in part 2, to me spoke more Satine than it did Padme. But I could be wrong. However, SheVP was thinking Padme finally got some acknowledgement outside the prequels, apart from the Clone Wars. And y'all want to attribute it to another character, LOL. Sorry about the y'all. I'm a Tennessee girl. Anyway, great commentary as usual, John. Thank you, SheVP. I really do appreciate it. All right, and that wraps up the show for this week. Treat yourself, a friend or a family member with sci-fi that's not Star Wars, but written by a Star Wars fan. For adults of all ages, but great for ages 11 plus, buy EMBARK Book 1 today. Available in ebook, hardcover, paperback, and audio book. Again, if you want to support my nerd world, this is how you do it. 7 books in the series so far, as I mentioned, looking at writing perhaps a few more. We'll see how I feel when I wake up from my surgery. Available on Amazon.com or at mynerdworld.net. Again, in hardcover, paperback, audiobook, and ebook. Book 1, as Earth faces its end, the fight to rule the stars begins. Taft Guardia, our hero and our protagonist, picked the right day to upgrade his ship when fellow pilot Keith Amaro, who he longs to be with, arrived needing help investigating a cryptic message left behind by her late aerospace engineer father. Unaware that an industrial accident inside Earth's largest supplier of civilian and military spacecraft has set off an apocalyptic chain of events, they make a shocking discovery. As war erupts during the global evacuation, Earth evacuees stand upon the brink of annihilation. Oh no! Realizing the significance of what they found, with the help of a ragtag squadron of pilots in really cool spaceships, I might add, Taft and Keitha, Taft really loves her a lot, might be humanity's greatest hope for survival among the stars. Choices will be made, as will sacrifices. Don't miss this 2021 Tale Flick Discovery Sci-Fi Award-winning series. If you like your science fiction space opera epic and filled with romance and action, then EMBARK is perfect for you or a friend or family member. Amazon.com, Jon Justice, EMBARK, or mynerdworld.net. Thank you so much for checking the show out this week. And a programming note. At least one more episode next week, and then I'll be taking some time off. The following Wednesday will be my surgery, and I probably won't be home until the week after. So perhaps a show around the 24th, but maybe not until the end of the month. So follow me on social media, Jon Justice on Facebook, at Jon Justice on Twitter, or at the My Nerd World on Twitter. You can also find me on Instagram at the Jon, Jon, at the Jon Justice on Instagram as well. All right. Again, thank you so much for checking the show out this week. I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. And I'll talk to you again real soon. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.
Hey, how convenient. That was Obi Wan Kenobi.